from our sponsors. We are in marketing after all. So just to let you know that if anybody would like to go and get a wonderful discount of 10% on an IDM course, now is the time to do it. They're just behind me, stand 34. So that's going to last for a few months. So if you are interested, go see those guys. This is a presentation about what we are doing in TMW for Lynx, which I hope most of you will be familiar with. It's a brand that's been rocking around for about 25 years and making various promises to guys like me. If I spray, I'm going to get some, which is nice. I thought I'd start though with just something I saw yesterday. Did anybody see the Oscars? Yeah? Put your hands up if you saw the Oscars, just get some sense. Thank you. Here's a guy, if I can get it to work, here we go. Here's a guy who I think has the Lynx effect.
Jesse James and Frank James, Billy Kid, all the rest. Supposed to be some bad cats out there in the West. But when they dug me and my gangsta ways, they hung up their guns and made it to the grave. 'Cause I'm a gangsta of love. Say I'm a gangsta of love. Well now, when I walk down the street, all the girls that I meet say he's a gangsta of love. Oh, let me invade him.
So if you want to become an Oscar-winning producer and director, wear Lynx. If I was looking around the room and most of you look younger than me, which is upsetting, but if you're under the age of 50 and a male, you've been promised for the last 25 years that Lynx will give you some kind of effect on the ladies, which means that you'll get everything that you want from a date and a liaison. And I think one of the most interesting things around Lynx in the context of what I'm going to present today is how very different telling the Lynx story is now to when it was when I was that guy trying to get the thing that Lynx was talking about. So this is a presentation that really splits into kind of three parts. One is to have a look at what we're doing around content for this audience, share with you some of the stuff we're doing, some of the learning that we've got. The second is to spend a little bit of time just explaining why it's difficult to make this work and where we sort of see the opportunities in terms of content marketing, social media and digital. And then lastly, perhaps in the last 5 minutes, I just want to touch on the way that we measure the value out of what we're getting. And it's probably worth everyone, in case you hadn't picked up on it, recognising that Lynx is a global brand. So although we call it Lynx over here, outside of the UK, it's called Axe. So everything that we're doing in here is actually benchmarked against a much larger picture. In terms of how I'll split the content up, 18 to 24-year-old guys is who we are talking to. And they are not the same as me, by quite a stretch. So I just want to talk a little bit about what it's like trying to target those guys in social media and what they value and what they don't value. Talk a little bit about the magic 1 million. A few months ago we went past 1 million fans, 1 million likes on Facebook, which has been an effort that we've been working towards for the last 3 years. It's a very different effort to a brand that wanted to do that now. So we were doing this at a time when maybe Facebook wasn't quite as prevalent, a different challenge there. But what does it mean to be involved with a community as large as that? And then, as I said, just touch on why we measure certain things as social and what I hope you can take from it. Now, some of you might recognise Kelly Brook. When we started with Lynx about 3 years ago, this campaign, Fallen Angel campaign, was one of our lead pieces of creative, the lead campaign for it. At the time, when QR codes weren't quite as naff, we were using new technology and putting it in new spaces and making some quite interesting use of digital media. Coming to this side, a few months back, Lynx launched its female variant. So the idea being there that there was, it wasn't fair just that the guys had the Lynx effect, that the girls should have it as well. And unfortunately that created so much Lynx effect in the world that we had to withdraw it, which was a real shame. But even more recently, looking at ways of linking up what we're doing in social channels into payment and actual purchase of the product has always been part of the DNA. Always making sure that we're doing something a little bit new and trying to do it not necessarily first, but maybe early. What's interesting, bringing you right up to speed on one of our more recent campaigns, is that in terms of what we have to do from a content perspective, it's changed quite a lot. So whereas a couple of years back, getting Kelly Brook involved in the Facebook Connect campaign, using that technology there was fine, what we're finding that we have to do now is start to execute campaigns that are social in nature across multiple types of platform, in multiple spaces. And I think it would be wrong to say it's always on. It's not always on. I think it's about always being present. So a campaign that we've just finished is for the Chaos Island. It's the back end of that campaign. And essentially what we did was to send 7 very lucky guys to the Lynx Island, where they got to party and meet girls and do all the kind of things that you'd expect them to do. Just have another video to explain how we had to approach that and maybe give you a little bit of insight to how we're thinking about content marketing for this brand.
So how did we decide to give away tickets to our party island? By creating a series of online treasure hunts, ensuring the prize mechanic was as cool as the prize itself. To drive fans to take part in the first treasure hunt, we created a unique QR code controlled YouTube masthead, as well as promoting the prize on Facebook with image posts and event pages, all of which drove to the competition page. Here fans were greeted by a video.
Welcome to Lynx Chaos Island. Welcome to Paris.
And told to tweet, chase the chaos to release the first clue, which happened to be delivered by a ninja.
Nice one, guys! Free the ninja! Quick, give me the clue, ninja guy!
In this case, the first clue was a fake surfing blog, on which was an image of our Lynx girl accompanied by some Morse code. The code, when translated, led players to a mapped microsite, where one of the pins on the map asked fans to think backwards and input a URL back to front. The final step required players to think back to the first clue and match the image in just 10 seconds. The other journey saw players given similar online tasks, including searching for Chitty Bang lyrics, working out a tricky Pinterest anagram, spotting clues hidden within videos, visiting a series of pseudo-blogs and fake websites, and completing some tough HTML5 games. Every clue, however cryptic, tied back to the themes of island holidays, chaos, and parties. and every step of every journey was designed to work across tablets, mobiles, and desktops. There could only be 7 winners, but there were plenty more happy competitors, and we truly realised our goal of deeper engagement and reward for our core group of fans. We also managed to recruit 50,000 new fans in 3 weeks, and received 800 tweets in an hour. And our YouTube masthead also garnered some pretty impressive stats of its own, and is now held up as an example for other brands to follow. As for the party itself, well, what happens on the island stays on the island.
As if I didn't need any more of a reminder of how old I am in comparison to my audience. When we did that campaign, which I'm sure you appreciate worked across lots of different channels simultaneously, it took me 35 minutes to complete the competition. The 7 winning guys that did it in less than 4 minutes. Very different audience. One of the other big changes between where we started with Lynx and where we are now is also focused around the technology and devices that people are using. So this is something that we've just done for our guys. It's a HTML5 game. The significance of that being that it will work across multiple different devices. So making this stuff work on the technology they're doing is pretty key. I think it'd be quite hard to have missed this campaign, but if anybody hasn't, the last part I just wanted to touch on was the importance of delivering this stuff in a global sense. So Lynx is a global brand. If you have missed it, we're sending a guy to space next year, which is nice. The simple promise there is that you will go up a man, you will come back a hero. In terms of what we have to do with that, it's about putting that content in all the kind of areas and spaces that they are, getting them genuinely involved in it, but also tying it in with a global asset as well. So if there's a lesson to be learned out of this, is probably how, in some instances, when you're looking at global stuff, you have to remember that the internet is just not in the UK or Ireland, it is everywhere. So why is this a bit harder than it was before? Well, I think the first thing for us is focused really on the amount of time that our guys spend with mobile phones. So for me, social is mobile, mobile is social. And if, I guess, a strategy that doesn't factor in the devices and the technology that people are using across the board is probably not really a social-led strategy. There's no point producing content if it's not on the devices where the guys are. Now, in the case of our audience, mobile phones are the most used device, their first choice, and they're checked 200 times a day. So our content has to work extremely well on there. What they do with the technology is also fundamentally quite different. So for those at the back, apparently 40% of the guys we're talking to are broken up on text. And they're not just breaking up on text, they're also developing their relationships, shall we say, using this technology. So when we talk about the idea of the mating game, you really have to appreciate that it's a very different paradigm that we're working in. Obviously, social's a big part of it. Facebook, 70% of audience are using it, 30% are using Twitter. What they're doing with it is kind of interesting. Big number, 40% of the guys that we talk to are really just trying to fill up time. They do tend to over-index on entertainment and fun, so being relevant in this space is often about sharing their humour and giving them stuff that they can do. It's absolutely embedded within their culture and their behaviour, so we're not trying to create a new behaviour, this is just reflecting what's happening. They are slightly more likely to get involved in branded content, but not necessarily as much as us marketeers would like to think they are. So if we're going to get them involved with what we're doing, we have to be genuinely worthwhile and give them something that they can't perhaps get elsewhere. And the last one, and again, I look at a reasonable amount of research around social media. They're still motivated by what they can get out of this, more so than anything else. So if you look at pretty much any research on social media, it will still tell you that the main reason why brands join, why people join branded pages is to get rewards, is to get incentive. So that's a part of what we've got. It's also not just about what they're doing, but it's also about what they like as well. So sort of banking on the left side is a whole set of kind of behaviours around this audience that we have to factor in. Our community manager, for example, is a direct mirror of the target audience we've got. So he has a lot of these kind of qualities. Some of them are quite nice, some of them less nice. I would say that to him if he was here as well. Don't think I'm being unkind. But they have a very different attitude and different outlook on life. And I suppose the reason I labour this point slightly is that for many brands, this is the audience that is going to be buying what you're selling in the future. This is how they look at the world. This is their relationship with brands and technology. And when you get right down to brass tacks and strip it all away, the big difference, the thing that makes this particularly challenging, is that they really only are interested in an answer to that question. So, how do we do it? 4 really simple approaches, if you're going to write anything down. I guess this is the point. The first one is around creating with them. So the philosophy we have on Lynx is to create once and publish everywhere. We almost treat content like APIs, so the idea that you create it there, but it can go anywhere that we want it to be is really important. The fact that we create as much of it as we can with our guys is also worthwhile. Now, I mentioned that we have 1 million fans on Facebook, so it's a pretty sizable community. It is worth knowing, though, that in terms of our goals around user-generated content, we are only looking for something in the order of about 100,000 pieces of user-generated content. So I'm making that point because I think sometimes we get very excited as marketeers with the idea that everyone's going to do everything we ever ask them to do. But in reality, and this is an audience that's pretty engaged with what we do, we are only asking for a small number of pieces of user-generated content to happen. Second point is around technology. So the importance of using their technology. Now, when we are looking at this, what we recognise from our audience is that half of them will use their mobile phone as their first device. So a big part of this year's strategy is to say, well, if mobile is first, how many of the ideas can we deliver across that first platform for our guys? What we also recognise is that many of them will be working and having in their hand very capable devices, which means that part of our content as a second tier has to work across that enhanced device. And then lastly, we will be creating standout content that is just targeted to the most advanced and capable devices that we've got. So if last year was about us getting the social platforms right, being in the right spaces, deploying content where we think it's going to get shared most, a lot of our thinking this year is around how we look at that device and technology piece. This is an audience that use a lot of social media to basically shape the way that they want the world to perceive them. We've done some very interesting research with the audience where we've gone out and had a look at the way that they curate their image and the way that they use social media to basically have what they call as game. So to be able to go out, play the game, get the digits, get the opportunity, immensely curated. What we recognise in the way that we think about content is there is that opportunity to get them to engage with our brand by essentially trading fame for favours. So if we're asking them to do something, by making their involvement with the brand visible on our spaces, we increase the likelihood of them wanting to actually share what we're doing. And the last one is really a point that I suspect we'll hear a lot this year from people like me who work in social, which is this need to go beyond the like. I don't know of any piece of content that we could create as marketeers that will be more interesting than the possibility of getting someone to send a picture of themselves to you. So this is a very competitive market space. So we have to be very realistic about what we're asking them to do and what the action looks like. Sat behind that is a recognition that asking for a like, fan-gating content, just trying to get people to engage for the sake of it, really is a very pointless exercise for this brand. So that's what we're doing in social. I just want to spend the last 5 minutes just quickly looking at the way that we measure it. Now I suspect a decent proportion of the stands out there are people with very intelligent technical solutions around helping brands and companies to measure the value of social. I think if I was here and just asked a very simple question, what should you measure? For me, it comes down to two very simple things. The first is whether the reach that you achieve for your social channels, for your social platforms, are comparable to the reach that you will achieve with other forms of advertising or marketing. So it's a very simple case of stacking that up on an efficiency basis. If it's more efficient to reach an audience through this channel than email, I don't think you have to be too much of a smart marketer to work out that this is the one that you should go for. I think the second question in terms of measuring it is really whether it is worth further investing in engagement to increase the likelihood of your audience doing something. So if part one of the equation is this more efficient to reach them through here, part two is it really worth spending any more money on increasing engagement? And if I was sat perhaps where many of you are sat, that's really the question I'll be focusing in on in this next year, to say, well, if I do increase the activity, am I changing any of the metrics or moving any of the metrics that are going to make any difference to what I'm doing? So am I increasing propensity to purchase? Am I increasing likability of the brand? Am I increasing awareness? All the things that have been present in marketing forever, what are we doing now? In terms of the way that we do it for Lynx, and I think increasingly more broadly Unilever look at it, is actually about tying a lot of this stuff back into brand love. So to what extent are we building an emotional connection with our audience, which brings them closer to our brand and increases the likelihood of them wanting to purchase? And whilst there's a lot of data and analytics and metrics and ways of looking at that sit behind this, what I just wanted to share with you is really the simplest distillation of that measurement. No social media presentation should go without a triangle at some point in it. And this is the way that we're looking at moving people towards having greater brand love for Lynx. So at the bottom, we have hand raising. So this is essentially who in the audience have put their hands up and said that, yes, I have an interest in this brand. So going right back to that point about in terms of achieving reach, how does that work? We then move up to the next level, which is consuming. Now, in this sense, we're not meaning consuming necessarily the product, but basically consuming the content that we're sharing with them. Next level up is responding, in terms of having a bit of a two-way interaction, followed by sharing, which is a very active state of doing something with our brand, right the way up to the top, which is creating. In many respects, the highest brand love that we can show from a brand in the social space is the willingness of the audience that we've engaged with to create with us. Now, whilst on Lynx, we actually work across a whole host of different social channels, including things like Pinterest and Instagram. I've just picked out probably the three largest and most important ones for us there, just to give you a little bit of sense of the kind of things that we're looking at. Now, for the sharp-eyed amongst you, you will notice that the triangle slightly changes when we have a look at YouTube. And I think that's really focused around the importance that we place in terms of subscribers, higher up that pyramid of brand love. So we do slightly change it for YouTube, just bearing in mind the complexity of what we're asking people to do. In terms of how we report it, these slides are available, so I don't feel you have to write this down. But essentially, against the opportunity that we have, we look at the base of who we get to reach, and then we have a look at whether we are over-indexing or under-indexing against that base, and basically what our performance looks like from there. By looking and attaching the various metrics to different elements of the ladder, it also means that we're able to look at the way that campaigns perform for us against specific objectives. So, for example, this is, I've actually fudged the numbers because it's slightly sensitive, but imagine this was the numbers that we have for January. What you'll see here is that the emphasis for the campaign activity we're doing in January was more around campaigns that focus on reach, rather than looking at kind of content sharing or content creation. So by looking at it in this way, it means that we can adapt the way that we report against specific objectives.